300. It's a number etched into history, burned into our collective imagination. A symbol of impossible odds, of ultimate sacrifice, of a handful of heroes standing against a tide of tyranny. We see the rain-soaked capes, the chiseled abs, the bronze shields holding back a shadowy horde. The story is simple, or so we're told. 300 Spartan warriors, the finest soldiers the world had ever seen, held the narrow pass of Thermopylae against millions of Persians. They fought with a fury that transcended mortality. They died to the last man. They saved Western civilization. It's the ultimate underdog story. But what if I told you that number is a lie? Not just a small Hollywood exaggeration, but a fundamental misunderstanding of one of history's greatest last stands. A myth that, while powerful, conceals a far more complex and even more heroic truth. The real story isn't just about 300 men, it's about thousands. And the math, the shocking, brutal math of who actually fought, who died, and who was forgotten at Thermopylae, will change everything you think you know about the Hot Gates. The year is 480 BC. The world holds its breath. Xerxes, the great king, the king of kings of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, has amassed an invasion force of unprecedented scale. His motivations are not just conquest, but vengeance. 10 years earlier, his father, Darius the Great, had seen his own invasion force humiliated on the fields of Marathon by the Athenians. For Xerxes, this is personal. He is here to erase that shame and burn the defiant Greek city-states to ash. The Greek world, a fractured mosaic of rival cities, is paralyzed by fear. Athens, with its powerful navy, and Sparta, with its unmatched army, are bitter rivals. For them to work together is almost unthinkable. Yet facing total annihilation, they form a reluctant alliance, the Hellenic League. Their strategy is born of desperation. They cannot meet the Persian horde on an open plain. It would be suicide. They must use their greatest ally, the unforgiving geography of Greece itself. They need a choke point, a bottleneck so tight that the Persians' overwhelming numbers become a weakness, a place where a few could stand against many. They chose a treacherous coastal pass, a sliver of land between impassable mountains and the raging Malian Gulf. A place called the Hot Gates, Thermopylae. The man chosen to lead this desperate defense was King Leonidas of Sparta. A veteran leader, a man born and bred in the brutal Spartan agog, a living embodiment of Spartan law. And with him, as the legend goes, he brought his 300 personal bodyguards. But this is where the simple story ends, and our investigation begins. Because to truly understand the sacrifice, you must first be willing to question the legend. Seriously, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're revealing evidence never shown in movies. And comment below, 300 or 7,000. First, let's look at the invaders. To understand the scale of the Greek challenge, we have to understand the force they faced. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus, our primary and most colorful source for the battle, claims Xerxes' army numbered 1.7 million soldiers. He adds in naval personnel, support staff, and camp followers, arriving at a staggering total of over 5 million people. Modern historians, however, call this a wild exaggeration. For an army of that size, the logistics would be a nightmare beyond comprehension. The sheer amount of food and fresh water required daily would have been impossible to source. Modern calculations suggest an army of that size would have drunk entire rivers dry and stripped the landscape bare like a swarm of locusts. The supply train alone would have stretched for hundreds of miles, a vulnerable, slow-moving beast. So why the inflated number? Herodotus wasn't just a historian, he was a storyteller. His goal was to emphasize the sheer, terrifying scale of the threat and to magnify the glory of the Greek victory that followed. So what's the real number? By cross-referencing Herodotus with archaeological evidence, analyzing Persian military structure, and calculating the logistical limits of ancient warfare, most scholars place the actual invasion force somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 fighting men. This was not a single, homogeneous army. It was a multi-ethnic juggernaut, a patchwork of the vast Persian Empire. Medes and Scythians in the first wave, elite Scythian archers, Babylonian infantry, and even disgruntled Greeks from Ionia who had been forced into service. And at its heart were the 10,000 immortals, the king's personal heavy infantry, famed for never falling below their full strength. Let's be clear, even at the lowest estimate of 100,000, this was a terrifying, world-altering force. It was an army designed for shock and awe, meant to crush the will of the Greeks before a single spear was thrown. So while it wasn't millions, the threat was very, very real. The odds were still astronomical. Now for the defenders. The legend focuses exclusively on 300 Spartans. But Leonidas did not march to Thermopylae alone, nor did he intend to. He was the supreme commander of a combined Hellenic League force. The truth is, on the first day of the battle, there weren't 300 Greeks holding the pass. There were over 7,000. Let's do the real math. From Sparta, there were the 300 Spartiates, the elite of the elite. But accompanying them were likely several hundred perioikoi, free non-citizen craftsmen and merchants of Laconia, and possibly a larger contingent of helots, the slave class of Sparta, who served as skirmishers and aides. But the vast majority of the army came from other city-states. The Peloponnese sent a huge force, 500 from Tegea, 500 from Mantinea, 120 from Orchomenus, and 1,000 from Arcadia. The powerful city of Corinth sent 400 soldiers, Phlius sent 200, and Mycenae sent 80. From central Greece came the forces that would prove most critical. 700 heroic soldiers from Thespiae, 400 from Thebes, 1,000 Phocians, and the full fighting force of Opuntian Locris. So the army defending the pass was more than 20 times larger than the legend tells us. This was no glorious suicide mission. This was a calculated military operation. The 7,000-strong army was tasked with holding the line, a living wall of bronze and courage. For the first 2 days, all of these men fought side by side, rotating in and out of the front line to rest their weary arms, repelling wave after wave of Persian attacks. They were a coalition, a brotherhood of cities standing together. Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you're ready for the real story, and subscribe. We're diving deep into the coalition's secret tactics next. This raises a critical question. If this battle was the key to saving all of Greece, why did Sparta, the undisputed military superpower of the Hellenic world, only send 300 of its elite Spartiates? Was it arrogance, a sign they didn't take the threat seriously? The answer is a complex web of religion, law, and prophecy. When the Persian invasion force arrived, Sparta was in the middle of the Carnaea, a sacred religious festival in honor of the god Apollo. During this multi-day truce, all warfare was strictly forbidden. To march the entire Spartan army would be a grave sacrilege, an act that they believed would invite the wrath of the gods upon them, dooming them to defeat regardless of their strength. As if this weren't complicated enough, The oracle at Delphi, the most powerful spiritual authority in the Greek world, had given a chilling prophecy when the Spartans asked for guidance. The oracle proclaimed, "Hark, ye men of spacious Sparta, either your glorious town shall be sacked by the sons of Perseus, or in exchange, a king of the lineage of Heracles must die." The message was brutally clear. Either Sparta itself would be destroyed, or a Spartan king had to be sacrificed. Faced with this divine ultimatum and bound by religious law, Leonidas engineered a brilliant loophole. The law forbade him from mobilizing the state army during the Carnea, but it did not forbid him from taking his personal royal bodyguard, the Hippes, which numbered 300 men. In selecting these 300, he made a grim and calculated decision. He chose only Spartiates, who already had living sons. This was to ensure that no Spartan bloodline would be extinguished in the battle to come. He was not just assembling a military unit, he was hand-picking a sacrifice. So the 300 were not a token force. They were a carefully chosen sacrificial offering, led by a king who knew with chilling certainty that he was marching to his death to satisfy a prophecy, inspire the rest of Greece, and buy his city time, all while technically not breaking sacred law. For 2 full days, the Greek strategy worked to bloody perfection. The Pass of Thermopylae was a tactical masterpiece. At its narrowest point, the middle gate, where an old Phocian wall stood, the path was only a few meters wide. This funneled the vast Persian army into a tiny kill zone, turning their greatest strength, numbers, into their greatest weakness. The Persian cavalry was useless. Their lightly armored infantry, used to fighting on open plains, crashed against the Greek phalanx, a solid wall of overlapping bronze shields and 9-foot iron-tipped spears. Xerxes, watching from a nearby throne, began by sending in the Medes and Scythians, believing they would quickly overwhelm the defenders. They were slaughtered. The tightly packed phalanx, with its superior armor and longer spears, was impenetrable. The ground became slick with blood. The bodies of the dead formed a gruesome new wall in front of the Greeks. Frustrated, Xerxes unleashed his best, the Immortals. 10,000 of his elite, magnificently equipped heavy infantry. He expected them to sweep the Greeks aside, but even they could not break the phalanx. The Spartans, using a famous tactic, would feign retreat, causing the Persian lines to break formation and charge forward in a chaotic mob. Then, the Spartans would turn in perfect unison and cut down the disorganized enemy. Herodotus describes Xerxes leaping from his throne in terror 3 times as he watched his most elite troops get butchered. The math of attrition was devastatingly in the Greeks' favor. For every one Greek who fell, dozens of Persians were killed. The 7,000-strong Hellenic force was not just holding, they were winning a stunning tactical victory, bleeding the Persian army white and shattering its morale. But then everything changed, not by the sword, but by a whisper. A local man from Trachis named Ephialtes, whose name would become the Greek word for nightmare, saw an opportunity for wealth and influence. Motivated by the promise of a vast reward from Xerxes, he revealed a secret, a hidden mountain path, the Antiquity Pass, that would allow the Persians to bypass the Greek position entirely and attack them from the rear. On the second night, Xerxes dispatched his Immortals under the command of their general Hydarnes to follow Ephialtes up the treacherous mountain trail. The path was guarded, but only lightly, by the 1,000 Phocian soldiers from the Greek coalition. In the pre-dawn stillness, the Immortals rustled through the oak leaves, startling the Phocian sentries. A brief, panicked skirmish ensued, and the Phocians, believing the main attack was on them, fell back to a higher peak to defend their homeland, leaving the path undefended. They sent a runner to warn Leonidas, but it was too late. The trap was about to close. As dawn broke, Leonidas's scouts brought the terrifying news. The army was about to be encircled. The battle was strategically lost. Any force remaining in the pass would be annihilated. Leonidas immediately held a final council of war. His decision was swift and pragmatic. He ordered the vast majority of the army, the Corinthians, the Arcadians, and most of the other allies to retreat immediately. This was not an act of cowardice. It was a crucial strategic calculation. The main Greek army needed to be preserved to fight another day. The Greek fleet, fighting a parallel battle at Artemisium, needed the army's support. He would stay with his Spartans to form a rear guard. Their job now was to delay the Persian advance for as long as humanly possible, buying precious hours for the retreating army to escape. And this is the moment where the shocking math of Thermopylae is finally revealed. This is where the legend is forged, and where the greatest heroes are forgotten. Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, or rather the 290 or so who were left after 2 days of fighting, prepared to face certain death. But they were not alone. The 400 Thebans were forced to stay. Leonidas had held them as quasi-hostages from the beginning, suspecting their city of secretly siding with the Persians. He would not allow them to retreat and potentially join the enemy. But one contingent stayed by choice. All 700 Thespians, led by their commander Demophilus, refused the order to retreat. They came from a small city with no great military reputation, but they made a collective decision. They would stand, fight, and die with Leonidas and the Spartans, fighting for a Greece they knew they would never see again. It was an act of breathtaking voluntary sacrifice. This is the most overlooked and most important fact of Thermopylae. On that final, bloody day, the last stand was not 300, it was nearly 1,400 men. The final defiant force was composed of roughly 290 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans. The largest single contingent of heroes in that final stand was not Spartan, it was Thespian. As the Persians advanced from both front and rear, this small band retreated to a small hillock within the pass. They fought to the fury that stunned the Persians. Herodotus wrote that they fought first with their spears until their spears shattered. Then they fought with their short swords until their swords broke. Then they fought with their bare hands and teeth, a whirlwind of desperate, doomed courage, until every last Spartan and every last Thespian was dead. They sold their lives dearly, buying the time Greece needed, and in their ultimate sacrifice, they forged a legend. Like this video if you learned something new, and comment Thespians below to honor their incredible sacrifice. Subscribe, this story gets even more intense. So, was it 300? Yes and no. The legend chose to remember the 300 Spartans. They were the perfect symbol, the ultimate warriors from a city built for war, led by a doomed king, fulfilling a divine prophecy. It's a cleaner, more poetic, more powerful story. But the math tells us the real story. The truth is that the defense of Thermopylae was a pan-Hellenic effort of 7,000 soldiers from over a dozen city-states. And the final, ultimate sacrifice was made not by 300 Spartans in isolation, but by nearly 1,400 Greeks, including 700 Thespians, who chose death over retreat when they could have simply gone home. By focusing only on the 300, we do a disservice to the thousands of others who fought and the hundreds of others who died alongside them. We miss the bigger picture, the fragile cooperation, the shared strategy, and the collective sacrifice of a fledgling alliance that, inspired by the stand at Thermopylae, would go on to crush the Persian navy at Salamis and their army at Plataea. The delay Leonidas's rearguard bought was critical in allowing the Athenians to evacuate their city before Xerxes burned it to the ground. The math doesn't diminish the legend of the 300, it enriches it. It transforms the story from one of a few supermen into something far more powerful. A story of many different brave men who put aside their rivalries and stood together against a tidal wave of empire, choosing to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. The story of Thermopylae is the ultimate testament to how history is written and how numbers can be shaped into legend. If you found this deep dive into the shocking math of the battle fascinating, please destroy that like button. It tells the algorithm we're doing something right and helps us make more content like this. What piece of history has been twisted by legend that you want us to deconstruct next? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell so you never miss an expedition into the real story behind the myths. Want to know what happened next? Check out our playlist on the Persian Wars right here to see how the sacrifice at Thermopylae led directly to the stunning Greek victory at Salamis. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.